Israel's ambassador to the United Nations, Gilad Erdan, was frog-marched out of the UN building this week. That actually just happened. We're going to get into that idiocy along with new meetings between Netanyahu and Joe Biden. Also, I have a crazy story I found from history in regards to Israel and Iran that I bet you've never heard of before. I'm Ben, and this is the Israel Guys. Welcome back to the Israel Guys, where we believe that in a world of Jew hatred and anti-Israel propaganda, you should have a direct connection to the land and people of Israel. So guys, I bet you did not know it at all because it normally has no relevance to our lives whatsoever, but the UN General Assembly has been meeting this week. Like probably most of you, I ascribe very little of anything to the UN whatsoever. But surprise, they are meeting this week, and I didn't know it till I went to prep for the show. This week, the United Nations, kind of to prove how idiotic the United Nations is, the United Nations let the president of Iran, speak to the General Assembly. President Ibrahim Raisi, otherwise known as the Butcher of Tehran. No protest. Hardly at all. Well, we're going to get into that, but no large-scale protests. All the leaders of the world sat in a General Assembly, respectfully, humbly, kindly listened to a mass murderer give an address to the UN General Assembly. Wild stuff right there. Wild stuff right there. If the UN doesn't exist, side rant, but if the UN doesn't exist to stop people like Ibrahim Raisi from existing in Iran as a leader, then what are we there for? What is the UN actually there for if all they can do is sit and quietly listen and at the end condemn Israel for something random that actually never happened? Okay? So they let him speak. There was no mass protest until Gilad Erdan, who is the permanent ambassador from Israel to the United Nations, he walked up and he held a sign at the back of the General Assembly. The sign was in memory of Mahsa Amini, the Iranian journalist. You probably remember the story. She was arrested last year by the police, by the, what do they call it? The morality police, I think, in Iran for not properly wearing a hijab. And she was arrested. She was in prison. But the accounts go that she was basically beaten to death inside a prison. Horrific story. That was just the tip of the iceberg of all the torture and just awful, awful oppression that happens in Iran, the murder and torture. And the citizens of Iran had had enough. A lot of people had enough. They took to the streets and protests, and hundreds of thousands of people in the streets for days, weeks on end. And the president of Iran, the Butcher of Tehran, put down the protests with extreme brutality. The protests were put down, eventually stomped out. And but to this day, he continues to serve as dictator of Iran. The world really did nothing, has done nothing in response to his brutal mass murder and torture and all the awful things that he's done, oppression of his people. And then on top of that, he often calls for the death of the state of Israel, the destruction of the state of Israel, and is actively moving towards obtaining nuclear weapons with the stated goal of annihilating the state of Israel with those nuclear weapons. So Gilad Erdan held up this poster in the back of the General Assembly, and the poster had a picture of Amini on it, and it said, "Iranian women deserve freedom now." He held up that picture for a minute, and then he walked out. And so what happened? Take a look at this video right here.
What is your ID? ID. UNID. UNID, it's on the table there. What table? There's the learning table.
Thank you.
You'll get it in a second. You know how many times they raised flags against Russia when Ukraine is here?
Yes, those were UN police escorting him out, frog marching him out of the building. He claimed to have been arrested by them, freed later on. This is a statement from Fox News. It says, it was not clear why he was being detained, though he was later released. Fox News Digital has reached out to the UN for comment. The ambassador told Fox News Digital he was detained with unacceptable brutality. The UN's lost moral compass was on full display today, Erdan said in a statement to Fox News Digital. Being detained for standing with the Iranian people and protesting a vile mass murderer who was given an audience on the global stage is utterly disgraceful. It is yet another example of the strong bias Israel suffers at the UN. Other ambassadors have previously held signs for ideological reasons, including in recent sessions on the war in Ukraine, with no repercussions. I will not be deterred and will always stand up for what is right and just. Erdan, who left the General Assembly Hall with the Israeli delegation, said the UN had reached a new moral low by giving a platform to Raisi, who he derided as a vile murderer. Quote, while the butcher of Tehran is speaking at the UN and being respected by the international community, hundreds of Iranians are protesting outside, shouting and calling on international community to wake up and help them, Erdan said in a statement. So, other people from other countries, other ambassadors, can hold up signs supporting Ukraine, supporting other things that fit with the world narrative. But when it comes to Iran murdering and torturing and brutally oppressing their own citizens, Israel is not even allowed to protest, even on behalf of Iran. Israel could protest. Erdan could have held up a sign in the back that said, the president of Iran shouldn't speak because he's called for the annihilation with nuclear weapons of the state of Israel. He could have said that, been perfectly valid, but he didn't. He didn't even speak up on behalf of his own nation. He spoke up on behalf of the citizens of Iran because Israel, as a democratic country, as a Western country, actually cares about people. Contrary to these dictators that run some of these countries that Israel is up against, including Iran, they actually care about the citizens, their own citizens, and the people of Iran. We're going to get into a story on that I don't think you've ever heard of before. I had never heard of till the other day. That really crazy in regards to Israel and the citizens of Iran. But first, are you ready to change lives in the land of Israel? We're in the middle of the Jewish high holidays, offering a perfect opportunity to fulfill the biblical mandate of giving to those in need. We're joining forces with Meir Panim, an extraordinary organization dedicated to transforming lives. Did you know that nearly 2 million Israelis, including over 1 million children, are living in poverty? These families face heart-wrenching decisions between buying groceries, medicine, or paying rent. Your generous support will provide essential food for struggling families, ensuring children have a warm meal, implementing long-term solutions to break the cycle of poverty, and empowering at-risk teens. Shockingly, 1 in 3 Israeli Holocaust survivors lives in poverty, enduring both the horrors of the past and food insecurity today. Meir Panim's mission is to give with dignity with their 5 restaurant-style soup kitchens and food vouchers. As Proverbs 19:17 reminds us, whoever is kind to the poor lends to the Lord. He will reward them for what they have done. Your contributions hold the power to make a lasting impact, change a life, and feed a hungry child, Holocaust survivor, and family today. Bring hope and crucial support to those who need it most. So, back to Iran. This is a crazy story that I found from the Jewish Journal this week. For decades, post-revolutionary Iran has made Israel the little Satan and its sworn enemy, in addition to the United States, also known as the big Satan. In Iran, Zionism is punishable by death. Travel to Israel, or as it's called on Iranian passports, the occupied Palestine, is forbidden. On the morning of September 19th in 1995, a plane carrying 174 passengers left Iran, bound for the vacation island of Kish in the Persian Gulf, which is likened to the Iranian Riviera. I'm not sure how you pronounce that. Months earlier, Reza Jabari, a 29-year-old Iranian flight attendant, had asked to leave his job, but his request was denied. For 6 months, Jabari had contemplated defecting, but needed a way out of Iran. The Boeing 707 departed from Iran at 9:20 a.m. Over an hour later, As the Iranian pilot prepared to land on the Kish Island, Jabari, armed with a pistol, entered the cockpit and hijacked the plane. He demanded that it be diverted to Zahran, Saudi Arabia, but the Saudis wouldn't allow it. They tried Jordan. King Hussein refused, and then Hussein called the then Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin. Israel and Jordan had signed a peace treaty the previous year in 1994. The plane was headed towards Israel, Hussein warned. Rabin had a clear policy against aiding hijacked planes, but there was a big problem. A crash was imminent. What was reported to me was that the plane had little fuel, and I did not want to be a partner or bear responsibility for the crash of a plane full of passengers, Rabin said at the time. According to Israel Radio, the pilot pleaded with air traffic controllers, "We must make a crash landing or land in Israel. We must land in Tel Aviv. We cannot proceed. Did you copy? We are low on fuel. We are a hijacked aircraft. We must make a crash landing." Whereas the Saudis and the Jordanians flat out refused a landing, Israel said yes to a hijacked plane from Iran, the world's #1 state sponsor of terror. Rabin agreed to an emergency landing, not at Tel Aviv's Ben Gurion Airport in case there was a bomb on board, but somewhere more remote. Shortly thereafter, the plane arrived at Ovda, Negev Desert Military Air Base, 18 miles away from Eilat in southern Israel. Negotiations between Israel and the hijacker lasted 3 hours. Finally, all passengers and the flight crew departed the plane and set foot on Israeli soil. Some of those passengers were Iranian officials and even military officers, accompanied by their wives and children. Jabari, the hijacker, placed the gun on the tarmac and surrendered. He only expressed a few words, "I'm sick of Iran." The hijacker begged not to be sent back to Iran. He said he'd rather stay in Israeli prison than be free, quote unquote, free in Iran. The Iranian regime condemned Israel for accepting the plane. They accused Israel of being in conspiracy with the hijacker and demanded that the hijacker be extradited back to Iran. Israel thankfully refused to send him back. He was processed through the court system in Israel and was ultimately sentenced to 4 years in prison. He served 4 of those, then was released on parole. And he actually converted to Judaism and moved to a village close to Eilat and ended up working as a security guard at malls in Eilat. Crazy stuff right there. That a hijacked plane out of Iran would have crashed. They were turned down by their Arab cousins and were eventually accepted into Israel because, like I said, Israel actually cares about people. The Iranian government, of course, condemned Israel for this. They would have rather have seen those passengers crash in the ocean and every single one of them drowned rather than the humiliation of them landing in Israel. These are the kind of people we're dealing with, and these are the kind of people that all the ambassadors at the UN sat and listened to with great respect and humility. These are the kind of people that arrested and frog marched the ambassador of Israel out of the UN for simply holding up a sign standing with the Iranian people against brutality. We got to go, but real quick, Bibi met with Biden in New York. There's been a whole series of meetings discussing a possible peace deal with Saudi Arabia. No particular details on that, but it looks like things may be moving forward. Hard to tell what might happen in the next couple of years, but could be really cool if Israel makes some sort of a peace deal with Saudi Arabia, adding them to the list of countries that Israel has peace deals with. Discussed a number of issues in their meetings, and Biden has finally invited Bibi to Washington for the first time since he took office in 2020. Don't forget to subscribe and to get the conversation going down below. We would love you to join our channel. We produce 5 shows every single week, except this week we did not because we are in the middle of a ton of really cool filming projects. Stay tuned for more information on that later. As always, tune out the fake news and tune into what is actually happening here in the land of Israel. We'll be back every day, Monday through Friday, with your direct connection to the land and people of Israel.